All right, welcome to the RatCast, episode 8. I'm your host, Icy with Icyfire Gaming. Today we have Shoddy. How you doing, Shoddy?
Hi there.
And we have Camera. How you doing, Camera?
Hey.
So today's episode, ZOS released a combat preview for Update 35, which is a precursor to the patch notes that are going to launch on the PTS on July 11th next week. And for the combat preview, they touched on two things. One is light attack weaving, and the other is buff timers, damage over time abilities, and heal over time abilities, and what the changes are going to be for these things in that next update that's going to launch on August 22nd in about a month and a half from now. So I'm going to read off the combat effects section first, and then we'll do the light weaving part after that. So combat effects. The other area we've spent a considerable amount of time on this update for this update is the uptime of effects in ESO, as these are another huge way to improve your combat capabilities. Outside of weaving, the main limiter of your effectiveness in combat is your ability to output events such as damage, healing, shielding, etc., which is bound by activating abilities, which in turn are bound within the global cooldown system. Activating an ability from your action bar locks out your other abilities for 1 second. So a way to circumvent the system is to utilize actions that add power or extra events without your need to continuously activate them. These are often seen as buff and debuff abilities or damage and healing over time abilities. Keeping as many of these abilities up as long as possible dramatically improves your combat potential, creating another area of mastery and potential of power deltas. Currently, many of these abilities fall within a 10-second window, meaning to maximize your efficiency, you must activate them once every 10 seconds. With 10 total active ability slots at your disposal, this often creates a situation where you want to load up almost every slot with one of these abilities, adding to your combat output for each duration-based effect you utilize. Between this and the engagement of weaving, this creates a reality where high actions per minute is required to be effective, as well as a robust rotation to keep as many of these effects up as possible. This in turn reinforces a need to glue your eyes to your action bars, taking you out of the action happening on screen. While this can create exhilarating combat experiences where you need to constantly monitor different activities on screen, it can also be overwhelming and particularly challenging for you to do so at the rate required to be effective. As such, coming in Update 35, we're increasing the duration of many of these effects in game, primarily damage over time buffs and debuffs. By extending the duration, we hope to reduce the stress of many combat rotations, allowing for you to focus more on the action in front of you rather than the action of juggling buffs and debuffs on your ability bar, and making the game far more accessible. I think that's a good place to stop. I could read it more, but that's like another 2-3 minutes of reading. But
Yeah.
so what do you guys think so far?
So go ahead, Shotty. Sorry.
All right. Well, first off, what is this meaning for players? It means that the
Barrier to entry?
what they're trying to do, they're trying to do two things. They're trying to make it easier for people who aren't good at the game, and they're trying to make it so that players have more active abilities used rather than rotations. So, if somebody who normally has 3 or 4, things that last 10 or so seconds, maybe they can add a few more now, focus more on their abilities and other things. And notice that they're specifically talking about things that are 10 seconds, maybe a little less, maybe a little bit more, but I don't think this will actually target things that are already at the 20-second mark. So armor buffs.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Certain other buffs that are already 20, 30, 40 seconds long. Those are probably not getting touched. It's probably going to be 10 and under, if I had to guess.
Actually, so since they're actually kind of making it more known that they're going to want to do it for other things as well, they've kind of already been doing it with, I know, Shoddy, since you're a Sork main, what was Boundless Storms or the other morph? What were those set to initially? Because I know Boundless Storms used to be probably 18 seconds, but now it's pushing 30.
I don't remember the numbers, but they did add a considerable amount of time to it. I think they actually leveled it out with most of the other buffs. I don't think it hits that. Oh, Boundless, sorry.
Yeah.
That's the morph that you shouldn't use.
Yeah. That's why I mentioned the other one as well, because they've kind of already been introducing that, where they're extending at least the armor buffs to hit like the 30-second, if not a little bit more, depending on, the morph or whatever.
Yeah.
If I may, like, I don't think so. While I agree with that, and like, yeah, that is what they're doing. I think any of the buffs that are already kind of above 20 seconds, I think are going to kind of be considered on a case by case basis. Whereas I think with a lot of the dots and hots that they're talking about, they're already sitting at an 8 to 10 second mark. So those are the ones that they're like specifically talking about. At least that's what it sounds like to me, that those are the ones they're specifically talking about standardizing.
Yeah. So I think when I hear that, I think of, like maybe radiating regen, or maybe some of the other dot abilities out there that last about 10 or so seconds. I don't have one on the top of my head, but those, pretty much all of them last about that long. So splitting trap, I guess. I think that lasts 10 seconds, right? So
I think so.
Things like that. I think what they plan to do is they're going to up the duration, but then decrease the effectiveness per second, so that you get the same effectiveness but over a longer duration.
Well, you're actually going to be getting a double. So you're going to be getting a third more effectiveness total, but about 20% less per second.
Is that what
because
they
they're
said?
increasing it. Yeah. So the math on it is currently dots and hots are standardized to be 1.5 times the effectiveness per cost, right? So like per cast of the ability, you do 1.5 times the effectiveness of the single like direct damage or direct heal version of it. However, they're going to be reducing that to a factor of about overall, they'll be increasing it to about 2 now over the duration. But per second, it goes down from 1.5 to like 1.2, I think.
Okay, so the actual healing per second and the actual damage per second that you can expect from dots and hots is going down by that amount that you mentioned, but you will be generating more value over the entire period that you are doing the battle. So if it's like, if you let it run the full duration, you're getting more value for that single like GCD or single cast than it previously, is what you're saying.
Yeah, basically stuff will be less effective per second, but you'll have to hit it less often.
Do you think rapid regen is going to be a little bit more valuable now then?
No.
No, I mean it's already kind of the best heal in the game. In terms of in a PvP standpoint, it's already one of the best heals in the game in terms of keeping your group alive.
Now he
So
said
I wouldn't
rapid,
really say
not
it's
radiating.
Oh, rapid regen. Yeah.
Because that one's got
I
a
don't know.
bigger.
Yeah, I still don't think so.
Rapid is not going to be good for group play. It's always going to be good for solo, but for group play, no. I think radiating will still reign supreme, more or less.
Because for those single target ones, like I just think about like, was it resolving vigor right now, echoing?
Yeah.
Like that's going to be pretty wild too. Because I'd imagine that's
Resolving
go
will be pretty strong. Resolving will be very strong.
Yeah, I'm curious what the numbers are going to be, because
the funny thing about healing and damage over time is there's a lot of, especially with healing, there's a lot of over healing, like in PvP especially, where your heal over time and other stuff just kind of over heal. And if your heal over times are doing a little bit less, all that really means is that some of the other heal over times will pick up the slack. Because like if you look at combat metric and stuff like that, it's just like 50% of your healing is just radiating and echoing vigor.
Right.
And then everything else, like you got a 30% radiating and a 20% echo, and then everything else is like 6-7%. Like they're very small numbers. All this will mean really is like the shorter duration stuff or the burst heals are going to make up this difference for a healer. And I'm just like singling out healing right now, just for the sake of examples, because we're talking about radiating regen. But yeah, you might see like radiating fall down some. I still think it'll probably be number one, but you would really just see like the burst heals and other things pick up the slack.
Now, I believe
There
they
was
did
so much
say
overhealing.
I believe they did say that they were going to take a look at a lot of the healing abilities as well, because tweaking heal over time is always a little threatening with PvP. Um, so I think it's honestly tough to say until we have numbers
Mm-hmm.
and exactly which skills are getting changed.
Right.
But overall, you'll probably see just a small decrease in healing and a small decrease in damage,
Well, that's
especially with the other changes coming up.
that's not necessarily bad because people were asking for a while now
Right,
about
right.
having team heals be reduced, and a lot of team healing is healing over time. What is not going to be reduced is the really short single target heal over times like rapid and resolving vigor. I doubt those will be touched. I mean, maybe they will, but
Maybe they'll get doubled to like 10 seconds.
I mean, it's possible. But what's not going to get touched is burst heals, which is what most like solo players use to begin with. So like the
Right.
solo player healing should be the same, but the team healing take a might take a tone down slightly, which there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, honestly, not a terrible thing.
I just had a crazy thought for maybe like a Magplar or a Stamplar where they have they have what's those two abilities? Living Dark going, which I know that just got increased to 12 seconds, but then they have the new update 35 vigor kicking in. Okay, so now they have two abilities that are ticking off every 1 to 2 seconds constantly. That's gonna be
Yeah,
pretty
it does
strong.
have the chance. It does have the chance of making solo heals really like not just good but easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot easier
Yeah,
to have a lot of solo heals because you'll have to
right.
hit stuff less often. You'll be using less resources, and resources are way more valuable when you're playing by yourself.
Yeah.
Well, imagine if both rapid regen and resolving vigor got upped to 10 seconds, and then the like the echo and radiating was at 20 now, and so what um, damage dealers like solo players could do is they could just have like a rapid and a resolving running throughout that 10-second duration, which
Throw
is
on intensive mender and you're invincible.
right because you're gonna get healing, like really powerful healing for a more duration, because those heals normally they fall off. There's a very long period of time of you just not using them often, but if you have a longer duration on it, that'd be interesting because it would mean that those players are kind of have that healing mitigation, so to speak, for a more percentage of uptime.
So I did just say intensive mender, and I guess this can be like the one of the last things we say on this, unless anyone else has a point. Um, Intensive mender, it'll be interesting to see if that actually gets affected at all, because I might be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure intensive mender pretty much hasn't been touched since Necro came out, really. Um, they always just kind of seem to forget about it one way or the other, whether it's strong or weak in that patch. But it's stayed pretty consistent.
Yeah.
Since you're actually talking about the Mender, I don't think I want it to extend because I feel like that was one of the key differences between
Well, yeah,
the Spirit Guardian and the Mender, right? One's 16, one's 8 seconds, and
absolutely.
having that short
Yeah, if
duration creates more
intensive
corpses.
mender, it'll be really, really good. And I also do like, yeah, that you're right, exactly about the short duration. You can get like 3 corpses off with just intensive mender if you hit your ability exactly every 4 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And
You
that's
know,
great for stuff like Blastbone's ult, but
I would
that's a very niche
say
thing.
that Zos's crusade in making things more accessible, as they say, will probably have, as it always has, some sacrifices.
Yeah, yeah. for the um, for the
For the
future of the
greater
game.
good,
Yeah, so we'll see what
as they
happens.
as they think, at least.
Oh, Jesus Christ. All right. So I guess that'll cover the combat effects, and we'll hop over to the weaving section now. So currently, to be truly effective in ESO's combat, you need to learn to manipulate something that is known as weaving, which refers to the act of squeezing multiple actions into the GC, the global cooldown window. Doing so drastically increases your agency and output. Blah, 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 whatever. All right, coming in Update 35, we're reducing light attack and heavy attack's impact in damage production by adjusting their damage to deal a flat amount, regardless of stats. We have spent a considerable amount of time investigating the baseline experience that a new player would have with these attacks, using that as our starting point for how much damage they do moving forward. The aim is not to harm the low-end experience and target only the higher end. In doing so, we hope to reduce the difference of damage potential in a way that retains the satisfaction of learning to weave, where the impact is still felt, but to a much less degree than before. For reference, in many of ESO's high-end experiences and activities, the average build sees roughly 15 to 20% of their overall damage coming from light attacks alone, which is a huge contribution to the delta of power that we see. While testing these adjustments internally, we've seen a reduction of 6 to 11% to overall damage, which allows for a much smaller and healthier gap while still retaining the sense of mastery and expression of that mastery with weaving. With this adjustment, we'll also be making a significant number of changes to item sets, passives, and buffs to ensure classes remain balanced in damage production, while also trying to do a better job allowing builds to amplify these actions. We've heard your cries, heavy attack build lovers, without introducing unhealthy gameplay between PvE and PvP. I guess Cameron, go first.
So I have two kind of main thoughts. The first is I do believe that deep down, not a whole lot is going to change, especially on the PvP side. I have a couple of worries, like heavy attack builds. That might be a little scary. But overall, I don't think anything is going to change. They mentioned adding more sets or ways to enhance light or heavy attack damage, and that's kind of the only worry that I have with it. But you'll see damage go down in pretty much all areas. I'm not a PvE expert, so take that with a grain of salt. But you will see, damage in high-end PvE go down, which isn't a terrible thing because from what I've heard, well, and what I know, power creep is a serious problem in endgame PvE. However, that's the first school of thought. The second school of thought is just kind of what it means in a more deeper sense, right? You can't just say, hey, I'm going to take this thing that players got really good at. And something that we just said in the sentence prior is a core part of our game, and we're just going to nerf it. And you know what? Like, that's okay. Good players, sorry. You don't get this thing anymore. I understand that they're trying to appeal to newer players, but there's a point where, like, trying to do something like that isn't going to help the newer players at all. Because, like, newer players or players that are just less mechanically skilled for one reason or another, or by even lack of trying, and I think especially by lack of trying, because I think that makes up the majority of casual players, is they're just never going to get better, right? Unless you just straight up give them an item that's going to give them a flat DPS value.
Right.
In what I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not even that it's players that's bad at the game. The large majority of players that, this would affect isn't really going to affect because the large majority of players are casuals who never really care to get better, right? Light attack weaving wasn't a thing. Sorry. One last little, light attack weaving wasn't really a thing that the casual players even cared about, because the ones who would have cared to get better would have learned light attack weaving because it's just clicking.
Right.
There's still people in the forums who are like, light attack weaving is cheating, or light attack weaving isn't intended and it should be removed entirely. Like, there's still people who are in that train of thought.
Yeah. I that wasn't really eloquent, I guess, but it's kind of tough to voice my concern in how this sort of describes what their point of view is, if that makes sense.
I remember talking with Is There No One Else? I think back in like February, a couple months ago, and when we were talking about jumping in PvP and how like everybody should do it and stuff like that, he was telling me once that people on the forums are saying that people who jump in PvP, they it shouldn't be allowed, and if it is
Yeah.
allowed, then
Yeah, it's crazy.
they need to make it cost stamina. Okay,
It's crazy.
which just
No,
seems
exactly.
it just
There's a
seems.
crusader on the forums who still does that to this day.
Oh my
So
goodness.
I played a lot of TF2. This is going to be a small tangent, but I think it's very applicable here for two reasons. One, there was something in TF2 called rocket jumping. It existed before TF2. It existed back in like Quake or whatever, I think. But TF2 was inspired by that. And so TF2 had rocket jumping, where you would shoot a rocket at your feet and you would go very high in the air or very far. And people who got really, really good at rocket jumping could literally travel around the map in seconds, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it would be as if you were to take that game and say, hey, people who spend all this time practicing this thing, we're going to take this thing out. So now, the people who spent all this time practicing this thing, that was a core part of our game, and that we've said is a core part of our game, you guys don't get to do it anymore. And I know that's a little further than what they're doing at ZOS here. I mean, they're not taking out light attack weaving, but they're basically saying that it was a problem that people were good at this, so we're taking this out, which
That
is a little weird.
that's kind of interesting because now that I think about it, there's other games that have the same kind of mentality as well. Where I know from League of Legends, there's a character. His name is Lee Sin, and they call this this particular move was made known by one of the players, Insect, I guess like almost 10 years ago at this point, where you can drop a ward and then kind of gap close to that ward to just help you gain more distance. And I guess in ESO terms, right, think of it like you're putting down your remote totem or your agony totem, and then you're able to gap close to that totem, which would allow you to bypass terrain and things like that. And something that wasn't really part of the game. Well, I guess it's part of the game, but people wouldn't really use it for like a utility type of thing, but to actually bypass terrain and stuff like that. But because this particular individual in the competitive scene made utilize that move a lot, he became so good at the move where all players, almost I guess 10 years later, even now, it's normal. If say you're playing a jungle character and you're using Lee Sin, if this is something that you can't do, then we don't want you. Okay. And
Yeah.
it's kind of essential now that this made up move, which is part of the game and is just part, if you're skilled enough to do it, then great, you're going to be even stronger. But if you can't, then you're just kind of hurting yourself. So it's interesting where I guess from your example and mine, two different games and two companies having a different approach to how they want to handle this new type of mechanic. And just kind of it comes down to the individual player because League of Legends is very competitive. People want to get better, so they'll learn and master and practice to actually get good at these things. And I guess I kind of segue back into the weaving thing. I know when I first started playing ESO, I think I started in September. I didn't learn about light attack weaving until maybe 7-8 months later in like April, May, where I actually started to use it and practice it, where today it's just a natural part of, it's like breathing for me. I don't even have to think about it. I just naturally do it all the time. And whenever I come across players, either in dungeons or whatever, will engage in light conversation, but then they actually ask me for help and stuff, or how to increase their DPS. And then I take about just 5-10 minutes of my time. They come to my house. We practice on the training dummy. I show some examples of light attack weaving. Then I have them do it. Then we just kind of go back and forth for a few minutes. And then just me giving them just a little bit of attention, they're able to, after that little 5-10 minute session, they're able to light attack weave no problem. I just increased their DPS to, as Zah said, by an extra 10-15% or whatever. And I think instead of nerfing this like what they're intending to do, if they just introduced a some
Tutorial?
like a tutorial to some degree that really was instructional on how to light attack weave. And they make tutorials almost every new DLC, because if you create a new character, they'll give you the option to run a tutorial, which will be in a whole new area completely, a little bit more updated. And they do this all the time. I don't see why they couldn't do something like this, but within the Fighters Guild or Mages Guild, and let that be a precursor, or not a precursor, a requirement before you can do vet content. Because let's be honest, we've all been stuck in a vet dungeon with a pug that is doing 5-10% of the DPS, and then because you queued in as a tank or a healer, you got to actually make up the slack doing like 40-50%, 60% or something like that, which is a bit ridiculous. But again, it comes down to the fact that the game itself doesn't have any sort of way to teach these players. So then people are just queuing up.
Absolutely.
These players are just queuing up into these dungeons, which, let's be honest, it says, say 160 CP required, 300. They have no right being there, okay? Because they just don't know how to do it. You can be 300 CP, but if you know how to parse, then you're going to do hell of a, you're going to do way better than somebody who wouldn't know at the same level, right?
Yeah, I absolutely think there needs to be a tutorial, not just for light attack weaving, but like just an advanced dungeon PvE tutorial where it just shows the basics of even how to set up a rotation, right? Like
yes.
Apply your dots and debuffs, or sorry, buff up, apply your dots and debuffs, spammable, refresh when anything is down, right? Like just that basic idea, walking a player through that, or even telling them, okay, you're on this class. Here are the dots that are available to your class. So you should probably try to cast this, and then use this. And something as simple as that would help so many players way more than what they're trying to do here.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think it'd be that hard to set up either. They can say, talk to the NPC. Hey, welcome to the Fighters Guild, whatever. I see you want to queue up as a DPS or whatever. So we're going to run you through the gauntlet real quick. Here, pick up this training gear that we have set aside
Have
for you.
it be linked to the Undaunted questline. Right now, to join the Undaunted, you walk up, you drink a mug, and then you have to go step inside of a dungeon. Not even do the dungeon. You have to step foot inside of it, and then you can complete the quest.
So that's
have them have an NPC there when you go to the dungeon and say, hey, it's your first time in here. We're gonna, do you need help on learning how to go through this? You can have it be an optional thing like the PvP tutorial is, so that you don't have to do it.
I'm sure there could be like some combat trainer that like sends you through a combat training session or something that has you attack dummies, and you have to do it a certain number of times in order to complete the quest. You've seen it in other games.
Mm-hmm.
Very simple. Just teach people how to play mechanics. It's not hard. It's just that Zos doesn't really care, so that's why they don't do that.
And since Cameron mentioned it, right, how, to do the Undaunted, you just kind of go to the bar, you take some drinks, and then off you go. It's kind of equivalent, because we're getting some idiot that doesn't know jack from nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty reflective of what you get.
Yeah, like too reflective now that I think about it.
Like,
Jesus
no wonder
Christ.
they're sending them straight from the bar to us.
Yeah, and now I'm freaking stuck with,
And I'm not trying to make light of anyone who's bad at the, like, I don't care. Like, if players are, deep down I don't care. I'm not a huge PvE nerd, right? Like, is it annoying? Yeah, but
my problem is that people try to do more than what they're, more than what their ambition leads them to being able to do. So they, people want to be a part of high-end stuff, but they don't put in the effort. It's fine if you don't want to put in the effort. You want to be a casual player, you can do that. But if you are bad and you want to be in good content that requires good players, then you need to become a good player. It is
there's a difference between someone joining in and saying, hey, this is my first time in this dungeon on vet, so I don't know too many of the mechanics. Could you just drop a word for me, like, before the boss? Like, at least then they're learning to, like, they know they're trying to learn. They're trying to be a team player, right?
Everybody has to learn.
Yeah, it's different than, someone joining who doesn't say anything. You can tell they're probably woefully underprepared, because in the first boss, they're just shooting light attacks, right? Which, by the way, means their DPS is probably going to go down next patch, because all they're doing is light attacking. and then they die and like blame the tank for not having taunt because they missed a mechanic, and
Yeah.
it's just frustrating.
Yeah.
Well, so here's the problem: is that ZOS caters to this, and they're doing it again. They're catering to get bad gameplay. Oh, you don't know how to light attack weave? Well, let's make it less punishing because you don't know how to do this. Instead of let's add something into the game that makes you a better player. They encourage bad people to stay bad, not bad people to become good and reward themselves. They reward people with no effort rather than people putting in effort and then being rewarded. That's the problem. And
Ooh.
that's what they're doing right now.
Well, yeah,
Um,
it's a side effect of the fact that this game likely makes well, it does, not even likely. It makes the most of its money off of casual players.
yes, a new
And
player
that's
comes
okay to
in.
an extent. But when you start just completely collapsing the skill, people talk a lot about skill ceilings and skill floors. At the end of the day, like if you're just trying to pull down the skill ceiling, it's a little
They
weird.
they don't want a skill ceiling. They've already said this. They don't like us. They don't like players who have the guy who has been playing the game for 2, 3, 4 years. They don't care about you. They really don't. You've
Jesus Christ.
already they've already made 80, 90% of the money off of you that they're gonna get. They're done with you. You're used uh you used
Shouting.
product to them. They don't. It's true. What they want is somebody who is new, who is fresh, has no idea about what the game is about. They see all these, quest lines and DLCs and houses and outfits and, you know, transmog stuff. It's not called that, but lack of better words. And they want you to spend money. That is what this company cares about. It is pretty obvious. And competitiveness skill is very anti new player. So they try to raise the skill floor with items, Oaken Soul, and they try to lower the skill ceiling through things like this newest change, light attacks, and they just want new players to feel fulfilled early on, rather than spending a long time to learn the game or getting discouraged and leaving early on. They want people to stay around at least 3 to 6 months to get most of that money out of them.
And the funniest part about that is if they had some of these tutorials, I guarantee a lot of the more casual players that do play casually would take the time. Like, if the tutorials were built into the game and they didn't have to seek this information elsewhere, they'd probably be a lot more willing to learn.
And
Yeah,
from what I remember when I was making my characters on EU, the tutorial it's pretty good in terms of teaching you how to bash, how to block, how to identify a heavy attack that's coming to you, when to knock somebody on the ground when they're off balanced, how to use some of your abilities. Like it's pretty good in that regard, but then you don't learn anything about light attack weaving until I think somewhere
You
between level
don't.
10 and like
until
30 or something. But then even
until
then
I
they just give you one line of text says, "Hey, you can light attack weave by just doing an ability before your light attack or something," and that's it.
I don't think they ever tell you that. I think you only learn that from word of mouth from another player.
Oh no, it is in the game. It is in the game.
Is it?
Yeah, yeah,
What?
it's a helpful tool to during your leveling process. Only once, somewhere between 1 and 50.
I see.
But that's all you get. That's all you get.
I assume most players probably don't even see that
Oh yeah, no, they don't. Hell no. Hell no. Dude, I remember
because
when I did my first trial in normal Hellra, I was on like the first part after the Era Atronach boss or whatever. I did like 2-3 million damage. I remember thinking I was like hot shit, whatever. And then come to find out, I think my DPS was like 10K. And I remember I was keeping my buffs up, but I was on one bar, just light attacking. I would hit my snipe or something and just light attack and then wait till the debuff went away, then do it again. I remember thinking I was hot shit. Little did I know that I'm holding the whole team hostage by being shit, you know? Oh my goodness. It
Well,
was.
that's the
I
really funny part. And I like the majority of this game is too easy in the sense that, like, both in a semi-casual sense, right? In the sense that, someone who's played this game for, I would say maybe 50 levels, the overland content is probably starting to get easy, if not already too easy.
Overland monsters die in like two abilities. Bosses die in three.
Well, the
Quests
really
have
funny
no
part,
challenge.
so on top of that, throw in the fact that, again, a lot of the players that are like really bad at PvE or like really just don't really care to learn or get better at PvE are just kind of light attacking over and over again because
Yeah.
they're probably coming from Skyrim, and in Skyrim you don't have abilities. So when in Skyrim you're just firing off arrows, they get to this game and they're like, yeah, let me just light attack my bow a bunch because that's what I did in Skyrim.
Well, that's what they. Most of you probably don't remember this, but when they were showing off this game before it released, like in beta and stuff, and they showed like videos and gameplay previews. You know what the guy doing the preview was doing? He was light attack spamming most of the time, and then he would occasionally hit an ability in between. There was no skilled gameplay at all, and that is like the player that they are marketing towards nowadays, especially is the guy who is just having a good time, feels good mode activated, running around and exploring the world, and they want him to have the best, or her to have the best experience that they can possibly have. And by making the game easier, they have a better experience. They don't have to learn, they don't have to do anything. It's just the game is ready to be played.
Shoddy, so you're referencing a video from like almost 10 years ago?
uh Not 10, but kind of that far back.
Like
Yeah.
8? Was it 2014 the game came out?
It, it, it it's probably close to 10, but yes, there was a developer back then who
Okay.
played like that, and I do
So
remember that.
so my only, I guess, argument is that was almost a decade ago, and I don't think they saw the game in its current state where it is now because it's evolved a lot. And light attack weaving was kind of something that came out of it by accident. So when they were showcasing that footage, I don't even think they even conceived that thought.
I know, but it's just that's still the train of thought that they have now. They didn't ever change that. They didn't ever adapt to the way the players changed the playing field of the game.
Mm-hmm.
They still have this idea that the player should play like that, and they
Well,
still cater to that.
and I'm gonna be real, the vast majority of players in this game aren't even going to notice the change. They're not going to notice it at all because nothing really will change for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna be real. I'm just going out on a limb and guessing that the vast majority of their player base probably doesn't even read patch notes, which means they wouldn't even know this change ever occurred.
Right.
Um, and that's just kind of the thing that irks me the most about it, I think. It's just the fact that they're doing a change that really is only hurting like the top 10%, and not even 10%, probably less than that. And to be honest, won't even really hurt them that much anyways, because their DPS is already going to be so high that like nothing's really going to be changing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Because
just
at the end of the day, yes, your light attacks do a significant portion of your parse, but it's also your rotation. And if your rotation doesn't get better, it doesn't matter how much damage your light attacks do, or if you're light attack weaving or not, you're never going to break a certain number.
I guess my problem with it is to summarize everything that I've said. It's not about the numbers. It's not about making the top end worse. It's about the fact that they are not promoting players to become better players. They are
Yeah.
promoting players to be the same, to never get better. That's my problem. They
Mm-hmm.
don't support their player base in the right way. They support them to keep failing rather than
Yeah,
succeed.
and if I might add, like, it's not even that the players are bad, it's that they're not trying to promote players getting better, right? Like, a player being bad or not doesn't isn't almost even relevant in the sense that, like, for example, we had a guildie who's a pretty good PvPer. Like he can hold his own, he knows how to set up a build more or less, right? Um, might not be the best thing in the world, but he's definitely not a bad PvPer by any means. And he didn't even know what light attack weaving was, like until a month ago,
No.
which is astonishing, first of all. But I guess my point is that like light attack weaving really isn't that important at the end of the day. I think a lot of people try to mystify it. So again, it isn't the numbers. It's just the fact that it's sort of the notion of the change, right? Like the idea behind the change that's flawed in my opinion.
Well, the average ESO player enjoyer is vastly inferior to people who actually do play this game for years and do constantly try to better themselves. And it's not really their fault. It's more of the company. They lead players to keep failing rather than lead them to learn how to succeed.
It's kind of a result of one Tamriel as well. Like, because stuff never gets harder in this game anymore. Like, until you reach veteran dungeons and veteran trials, this game does not increase in difficulty.
It's kind of, I feel like there's a saying for it where it's more profitable to keep you ignorant in a weird way.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what they're doing instead of getting to the crux of the matter, which would just to be to create a tutorial, educate their players, and create a much more healthy, since they're using that word in that paragraph there, a nice healthy environment. They're just band-aiding the solution, kind of keeping you sick the whole time so that you keep coming back to the doctor's office.
Drip feeding.
Yeah, exactly. So
that is completely true.
I don't want to get too much into it because then we're gonna break the fantasy of Elder Scrolls Online and get into reality, which that's not what this podcast is about. So, all right. So I guess we're hitting the 40-minute mark, and I think we kind of hit everything that we want to hit, unless you guys are good.
Good. I mean, I just want to reiterate, like, I don't want this to be placed, like, I don't want any blame to be placed on players that feel like if you're a player and you're like, I hate light attack weaving because blah blah blah, like, you're entitled to that opinion. That it doesn't matter. Like, congrats, I guess. I it doesn't really matter to me. It's the notion of the change on the devs' behalf.
It's the message of their thought process, what they aim for.
Right. All right, and with that said, we will end the episode here, and we'll catch you guys on. I think we'll probably come back for the actual PTS when that drops next week, and we'll do a review on whatever the hell actually happens, and maybe we'll get some numbers to these light attack stuff officially. All right, catch you guys later. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.